Hi everyone, we're here live at the Fossil Cartel, and I'm so honored to have the author of The Gem Trails of Oregon and Washington and other books here, Garret Romaine, and he's going to talk to us about rockhounding in Oregon and maybe Washington. Take it away, Garret.
Thanks, Susan.
You're welcome.
And we'll get these lights so that this screen shows up a little bit better. So I'm just going to talk about some of my favorite rockhounding locales in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, just a little bit across the border in California. Then some planning tips for you for your own adventures, and then some of my mishaps along the way. So I'll give you a quick ID of who I am, sites that make it all worth it, and then planning, mishaps along the way. Pretty easy. So this is me down at a gold show down in Salem. My education is in geology, geography, and business, or as my parents said, pick one. Occupation as a writer, journalist, columnist, tech writer, or as my wife said, pick one. And then my interests, rockhounding, gem collecting, fossils. With a geology degree, just anything I can find out there is fun, and I like to get out. So here's some of my titles: Washington, Oregon, gold panning book. Worked with a couple of different publishers with Falcon Guides and also with Gem Guides. So starting to fill up the screen a little bit. I've got a blog out there at writingdocsblogspot.com. If you Google me, you can find it. I've also done a few YouTube videos on some of my collecting. Most of these were in Washington. They were pretty fun. I think there's 7 or 8 of them. But let's get started. Let's talk about rock. A few in Oregon, a couple in Washington, and then Idaho is kind of like your stretch objective for really getting out there. Now notice that I didn't include the coast because that's just, everyone knows that, right? Agates, jasper, petrified wood galore. But I do have one in Portland I can tell you about. But most of what I wanted to talk about tonight was crystals and kind of more exotic stuff that we have in the Northwest that you wouldn't normally think about. So the first one is at Glass Butte, Oregon. This is obsidian, but this isn't just your black obsidian. There are a bazillion different kinds up there. Someone told me once there's 250 different named varieties of obsidian at Glass Butte. It's about halfway between Bend and Burns, so not too far. You can either surface collect or use heavy tools. There is free dry camping. What I mean by dry camping is there's no water, there's no toilets, but there is a pit toilet. And it's near a lot of other locales in the Oregon book. So I'll show you a little bit more. About halfway between Burns and Bend, out Highway 20. Very beautiful out there. I enjoy it a lot. And you'll find a lot of other spots. Hampton, there's some really nice green petrified wood back here from Hampton Buttes. Helena has the beautiful limb casts. So, right next to it, there's a cinnabar mine in opalite. So there's a lot going on out here. And like, it's just everywhere, right? As soon as you park the car, your Glass Butte is made of obsidian. But that's pretty common yard rock, right? That's not exactly what you're looking for. At least on this spot, there's a little bit more mahogany obsidian, kind of that brownish that's kind of cool.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is the cinnabar a crystal or not really?
No, it is a mercury mine, so there was enough there to mine, but it's more like that red showing on white opalite. Yeah. But I think if there's parts of it, if you look really closely with a microscope, you'd see crystals, which is pretty rare for cinnabars. That's a good one. You can see right here, there's a little bit of a rainbow hue on this particular piece. This is from the Aurora Borealis pit, and it's pretty. But there's other stuff out there that's just gorgeous. Unfortunately, it involves some real hard rock work. Right? This is sledgehammers and picks, and it's work, but it's worth it. There's some great stuff out there. I even like just the pastel bluish. So, like I say, it's hard work, and it's hot out there too. But it's well worth your while. It's not far off the road. You would think that it'd be dangerous to your tires to be driving on obsidian, but I've never had a flat tire out there. I think it's brittle enough that it just, if you have enough belts in your tires, I've seen sedans and minivans out there. I'd rather have a Jeep with better tires, but it's only a couple miles off of the highway. So, but the trick is that the local ranchers will tear down the road sign constantly, just as a way to maybe foil people from getting there. Okay. So the second one on my list of favorites in Oregon is Rabbit Hills, Oregon. This is the famed sunstone locale. And mostly it's honey yellow, little tiny crystals, but it's, again, everywhere. The smallest ones are really in the dirt as soon as you get out. It's just how small are you willing to bend over for, right? It's about 20 miles north of Plush, which is about 50 miles north of Lakeview, but kind of more east. I'll show you a map. Again, free dry camping out there. There's a good outhouse. There's lots of sagebrush to roam. My friends have found arrowheads out there, even though we're not supposed to collect arrowheads. If you collect them incidental to rockhounding, it's usually okay. What I found is it's a great place for meteor showers. That around August 12th is usually the Perseid meteor shower. You've got an endless horizon. It's all very flat bowl. And so 4 of us just laid out in a cross. And then as soon as anybody saw one, we just incremented the count. We got to 45 before we moved on to something else.
Isn't it really hot though in August?
It's hot during the day, yeah. Bring more water than you expect to use. Yeah, and it's a long way to Plush too. But really, it's a nice spot. The ground is littered with stuff. And so if this was Glass Buttes, you just go out here and then take 395 down, then hook back up. And I think it's a beautiful area. This is the Abert Rim. You can see all the different terraces as the ancient lake level went down. It's very flat on the old lake bed. Sagebrush everywhere to roam through. And here's what they look like. I don't think that's too washed out. Honey yellow is generally the kind that you find. And this pretty much just shows how hot it was out there. It's a really vague picture. But it's in this basalt that has, it's got the sunstones in it. And then it's facetable. It makes for a beautiful gemstone. There are some fee dig operations nearby, so that if you get tired of the yellow stuff, you can go over to Dirt Devil and Spectrum. Both have a fee dig, and they'll let you pick off of their conveyor belt, or they'll let you pick through their pile.
Which one do you like better? Which one?
Dirt Devil. I've met the owner, and my friend knew them, and they're pretty down to earth. Yeah, they're good guys. So this red is from an inclusion or some kind of a contamination in the feldspar, a copper, and it gives it it's called a Schiller effect, SCHI. Anyway, you can see there's lots of cool uses for this stuff. Number 3 is in Washington. It's at Hanson Creek. This is a quartz crystal locale, and it's right out the interstate, out Snoqualmie Pass, near Dead Rockhound Gulch, which is true to its name. Several rockhounds have died trying to get into the vugs and the cavities in the cliff. They rappel down. Very dangerous. This is not nearly as dangerous. And again, as soon as you get into the area, there's tiny little quartz crystals littering the ground everywhere. Some people will scream, but it's usually pretty damp there, so that's not real easy. So just out the interstate from Seattle, just on this side. This is on the upper area. There's an old logging road that goes through here, and then as you walk by, you'll notice every once in a while there's a handful of quartz crystals in the ground. The more common area is down below. In my book, I list this as kind of a stretch objective because you can't drive to it anymore. The last time we were up there, there was some kind of a meth lab that had burned down, and they just closed the whole road off. But the bottom area is pretty accessible, and it's a little bit amethysty too. There's a little bit of purple you can see in the top of this one, and then nice clusters. That'll come out with oxalic acid. Just take off that iron oxide stain. And one of the things that's famous is this the idea of a scepter, where it's got a little bit of a built-up top to it. You can see these have got the amethysty purple. But this is the hardest stuff to find at Hanson Creek. Most people just come away with lots of crystals. And I think he did this over a couple of weekends. But they're water clear, right? They're not the milky quartz that you can't do anything with. These will make earrings, they'll make bouquets, anything. So if you compare this to the agate and the petrified wood and the jasper that we get so much of down here, it's kind of a nice spot. Okay, the next one is over in Idaho. It's called Mica Mountain. And if you know a little bit about mineralogy, what you're looking for is a pegmatite. And I noticed there was some pegmatite on the ground over here. That's where you start to find your emeralds and your rubies and big micas, tourmalines. This material isn't good enough to have emerald, so it's got the precursor mineral, which is beryl. But if you find it up there, it's really nice.
I thought emerald was a beryl.
Well, yeah, but
It's like,
beryl isn't an emerald, right? It's like
right. Okay.
up the ladder. It's not a bad hike. It's steep. So here's the border with Washington and Idaho. Here's Potlatch, Moscow, and here this area. So it's a fur piece. Here's Lewiston down here. It takes a while to get there, but it's worth it. I liked it. Here's the old pit, and there's mica and tourmaline inclusions all through here. Then the pegmatite went right through there. And back in the day, before they put glass into wood stoves, they used something called Isringhausen. Anyway, it was this muscovite. They could use the mineral muscovite in sheets, and you could still look into your wood stove. And it was resistant to heat, so it's pretty cool. And just in giant books, right? You could just peel this off, tiny layer at a time. And in this schist right here, in the pegmatite, were these tourmaline crystals. And they clean up pretty nicely. They're a little bit fragile, but you can find them pretty well. And it's something that you don't find very much in Oregon. I can think of a couple places in the Cascades, but up here, where there's better mineralization. So that's one of the reasons. And it's a nice hike, it's a nice area. This is what the little garnets nearby look like in the schist. There also is starlight twins up there, which is pretty rare also for the Northwest. This is really about the only area in the Northwest that I know of for starlight twins. This is beryl that's kind of advanced more to emerald, and you won't find anything like that up there, but at least know that it's that pale green, and then these are your mica sheets. So, cool mineralization. Another Idaho spot is at Seven Devils, and this is above the Hells Canyon area, and it's remote. It's not all wilderness, but my parents grew up in the Baker area, and so I've always really liked this area. They talked about driving up the Kleinschmidt grade, which was built for the copper mines up there. You've got, this is nowhere near what you get from Bisbee, Arizona, but it's got pretty cool copper. Malachite, azurite, bornite, chalcopyrite, chalcocite, and just plain pyrite if you can get into the right spots. So here's your border. There's the Hells River Canyon where the snake goes through, and then it's just a little bit on the other side. Here's where Council is on Highway 95. So it's out there, but it's beautiful. It's worth the drive. And this is what I always like about out here is that when you're near a copper deposit, right? My grandparents took me to a copper mine out in Hells Canyon, and I asked my grandma, "Is it always this easy?" She said, "Sometimes." Yeah, because even a 6-year-old kid knew there was something different about that rock. So, and all we did was just look for where it was the darkest, greenest. It made it pretty simple. So this is what you find. A little bit of native copper out there also, which is rare for Oregon and Washington and Idaho, but this is one of the few places. And then if you were lucky, this is what azurite and malachite would look like. I didn't see anything near like this, but I wanted you to at least know what's possible out there. I think you'd have to open up a tunnel to get into that. But the other one is this peacock ore of bornite, which is what happens when chalcocite or chalcopyrite, one of those, starts to tarnish. It makes a peacock ore. Kind of, this is really radical, but you'll know it when you see it. When it's not tarnished, it's kind of ugly, but it's heavy, and you know what you're into. So that's why I like the Seven Devils area. Over at Lolo Pass, there are jet black smoky quartz crystals. It used to be rare to have access issues, but I've heard from a couple of readers that there are issues now with the Forest Service. About 7 or 8 years ago, a rockhound died by tunneling underneath a rock that collapsed their pit, and that seems to have caused some problems up there. So it's also a summer locale. You can run into snow as late as the end of June and as early as the middle of August. So when you time your trip that you've got to go, you have to be careful because it's high up there. But it's a beautiful country. It's a drive up the Clearwater, and I liked it. So the border comes right through here, and there's Highway 12 going up over the pass. And I think it's some of the best parts of Idaho. It's just beautiful out there. And the pits themselves look a little bit like a war zone, but to me, that helps me find where the other rockhounds have been. I don't mind that. And if it's already, the land use is for rockhounding, then I don't see the point in bulldozing it flat. There are places in Oregon where the BLM has smoothed over the old rockhound pits. Out at Stinking Water is one of them. And so you can't find where the rockhounds used to dig, and it's a little bit frustrating. So jet black smoky quartz, which is a variety of regular quartz crystals, but you can see it can get, they're well formed, they're well terminated, nice faces, and very distinctive. And so it's definitely just the drive out there, what you get. There's just not very many places in Oregon and Washington where you can get smoky quartz. And some of it isn't completely jet black. It's got that kind of an amber hue, but they're well-formed crystals, and I enjoy it quite a bit. Okay, another one over in Idaho is Emerald Creek with the Garnets. This is a fee dig area. The Forest Service runs it. There's great camping nearby. There's a special kind of a garnet out there called a star garnet. If you polish it perfectly round, then it will display a 6-bladed star. I'll show you some. But there's also a fee dig area at Fossil Bowl with some really interesting fossils from what's called a Lagenstraten. They're very well preserved with no oxygen, and you can some of the original plant material from 55 million years ago is there. So it's a pretty cool place, but it's not exactly one of my favorites like this one is. Come on in. So just to catch you up, I've been talking about some of the best places in the Pacific Northwest, and right now I'm talking about Emerald Creek in Idaho with the Garnets. So it's out here, this is kind of in the Panhandle. Remember Moscow, Mica Mountain. And there are so many garnets in the sand out here that there is a sandpaper factory. This is where they get the garnets to put on sandpaper. Wow. The interesting thing about garnets is when they fracture, they never fracture cleanly. And so with your sandpaper, it always stays rough until there's no garnets left. And they can clean them out by gravity. And so there's a sandpaper plant right below the dig area. So this is what it looked like the last time I was there. The first time, they just kind of like pointed you at the creek, but now they've got it a little bit more organized. And you have to get reservations from the Forest Service because it's a great spot, because it's great material, and because a lot of people want to. They've had to organize it a little bit more. But people aren't coming out of there just sloppy, muddy, dirty either, which I did. So it's pretty civilized now. And it's probably hard to see, but this is in the creek. There are garnets just everywhere. And it's amazing how many garnets are there because the schist is just loaded with garnets and it disintegrates. Schist is not a very hard, competent rock, so it's always falling apart. But the garnets are very hard and they stay behind. So with outcrop after outcrop of these types of rock, you can see why the creeks load up. And here's some plates that are for sale. There's a woman in a trailer down below the feeding area called the Garnet Lady that operates a little impromptu summer-only rock shop. And she's got all kinds of garnets for sale. If you don't get what you want, you can always go to the Garnet Lady and make sure you leave there with something good. So here's an example of what the star garnets look like. And you can see that it's pretty pronounced. You have to get it polished just right. But there are tiny crystals of rutile in the garnet, and they orient themselves so that the light does that. And what you're going to find are these tiny garnets the size of a large pea or a garbanzo bean. And then, this is only a 4-star. This is a 6. That's a nice 6. So it's kind of, it's no guarantee that every garnet you find is going to be a star garnet, but a lot of them are. So that's what makes this an especially attractive garnet site.
And you wouldn't know unless you polished it.
You don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you can shine it through. I think the polishing is what helps identify it. Okay, my next spot is another obsidian locale on the very bottom Oregon-California border at Davis Creek. And this is another one that is operated by the Forest Service, but it's free. You just have to make sure that you get the permit at the Davis Creek grocery store. This is needle obsidian. It's very rare to find obsidian needles, and this is probably one of the best places in the world to get it. From tiny slivers, like little sewing needles, to giant spikes. And this is one of those classic locales. As soon as you get out of the ground, they are literally under your feet everywhere when you're at the spot. So
they make great wind chime.
They do. They can fracture. You don't want to have them out there in that storm we had last month. But so this is Highway 140 going out to Goose Lake, New Pine Creek. There's Lakeview, and then I think that's 395 coming down. So that's only about 10 or so miles. And then this is where the Sunstone area was over here. So there's no real rhyme or reason for why these needles are here, but you can see them. They're laid out in this little nest, and you just have to carefully pick them out. We just go slow. Here's what you could come up with, though, and this is more typical. This takes work. Well, it takes patience.
How long did it take to get that much?
That's 2 days. That's 2 days. And this was mostly me, and this is mostly Frankie and Dirk, my associates. They had the patience. But there's other obsidian down at Davis Creek and nearby Lassen Creek. And I'll be writing these up in the new Gem Trails of Northern California. There was a mention of them in the older version of Gem Trails of Oregon. When I redid the Oregon book, I just thought, well, that's crazy. That's California. I got plenty to do in Oregon. I don't want to start adding everything. Plus, the directions were kind of fuzzy. So there are some pits about 5 miles north of the Needles locale, also organized by the Forest Service, also free as long as you have a free permit. And you've got this gold Apache sheen. You've got a rainbow sheen. This is kind of a purple sheen. So it's pretty impressive, the variety out there. It's just not your typical black obsidian. But you have to work for it. Okay, I wanted to at least mention one site that you could get to without having to mount a major expedition. Clackamas Park, where the Clackamas River comes into the Willamette River, just down by Oregon City. It actually has some pretty decent rockhounding down there. There's agate, jasper, and petrified wood. You can get some pretty large pieces The water has to be low. And if you can't get down south on the Willamette, then this is your best bet. In the Oregon book, I wrote up a canoe trip, an overnight canoe trip that my friends and I mounted from about one of the ferries below Independence maybe to St. Paul area. And we did it in July. Every time you came around the corner and saw another gravel island, you just wanted to jump out and check it out. By the end of the trip, the cooler was almost completely full of gravels, giant agates, petrified wood. There were fossil bones,
Wow.
jasper. So, but if you can't do that, this Clackamas Park area is really easy. It's an easy park. This is where the Clackamas comes down, and then the Willamette would be behind me. You can see there's lots of gravels, pretty good size, right? So you're not just picking out little tiny pea gravel stuff. But it does get a little bit populated, so the fishermen are working the bank here. But I like that Clackamas side. And then down this way, further downriver, there is another entry spot that's open to the public where you can actually drive on a gravel bar that goes out. So it's just nice that there's a spot inside the city limits. You don't have to go all the way to Idaho. Good agate, carnelian agate, clear agate. So there's material there. Petrified wood. I usually just pick up anything I see that's got lines in it, and I'll check it out later or tumble it up. But you know, the Willamette is pretty famous for petrified wood. So okay, so now Bohemia, Oregon is a gold mining spot, and since I also do the gold mining, and since Oregon has gold, I thought I'd at least mention one. I like this spot. It's a little bit further south, but it's got mine ruins. The 3 creeks out there are all have gold. It's a public area, and there's lots of good camping, good organized camping. So out of Cottage Grove, out past the reservoir, this is the Bohemia area. There's Bohemia Mountain. Like I say, I'm one of those that I love to see the old ruins of towns. This was the general store in Bohemia up until the end of the Depression. That was the last time it was really active down there. It's been on and off ever since, but yeah, keep out. I always recommend people stay out of old mines unless they know what they're doing, and if they know what they're doing, they're not reading my books. So they're spelunkers. They've got all safety equipment. There was a group up in Washington called Northwest Underground Explorers, and I found them really useful for my Washington book because they were going into these mines, they were finding the abandoned mines that no one had seen for a long time, and they just did a great job, and they used GPS coordinates too, so you could find them. I met up with them on one of my trips. But generally, you don't need to go in. This is for, gold panning, I think is safe, it's easy, it's pretty harmless, and this is one of the creeks. I think this is Sharks Creek below one of the campgrounds. I was going to pan up here. My friend was going to fish down there, so it was a beautiful evening. And it's got pretty good gold. So this is not my picture from there. This is just an internet picture. But, this is usually what I end up getting is a lot of black sands and snucker bottles. But it's a good spot to go, and it's got some history. Okay, this might be one of the last of the areas. This is Republic for fossil hunting. This is a feed dig operated by a nonprofit up in Republic. Leaves, insects, even small fish. It's very family friendly and very inexpensive. I think it was $3 a person or something, maybe $3 a specimen. You can have 3. So here's 97, and then you go over Highway 20 to Wakanda, Republic, and Kettle Falls. So you're getting up there in northeast Washington. What they've got is an outcrop from an old lake bed that's tilted up a little bit, and every once in a while they'll clear out more material, but they've got their hands full just going through this. Some of these are really dark, almost coal beds, lots of organic material, and they're good fossils. They're well preserved, leaves mostly, but this is their stone rose, which is their museum's main flower. It's like a dogwood. You can see little fish, bugs, twigs, flowers. So, and the interesting thing there is you get to keep what you find, but they're going to go through it and they're going to make sure that you haven't got something that would be interesting for science. And if you do find something new, they'll name it for you, right? So it's your chance to get your name in the great book. So it's kind of fun. She was going through my stuff and she found something. I got a card a little bit later that no, it was just an egg sac. Sorry, but missed it by that much. Okay, so you can see I've been around a lot. I want to take a few minutes to just kind of talk about the challenges out there and help you on your planning for your next big expedition. Mostly I try not to backtrack and I try not to overpack, but sometimes we used to look like the Beverly Hillbillies back in the old days.
Can you please go back one? I just want to,
So, I hate to find out I missed one. I like to line them up.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thanks.
But you can't overplan either. This was one of my early spreadsheets that I've never really looked down. Really? You planned it out to the hour? So, back in the old days, in the early 70s, this is what you got for guidebooks, right? This is their guidebook for the Glass Buttes area, and it's an arrow pointing towards Bend. So, now the instructions aren't too bad, but that milepost marker is never there. Anyway, later in the mid-70s, at least the old gem atlas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's not too bad, but it's not very clear, right? Kind of a rough guess on the mileage, and there are a lot of roads going in there, and so you can miss that one really easily. So this was the first Gem Trails book that Mitchell did, and getting a little bit better, but still when I went out there, I had trouble with some of the mileages. Tim Fisher, you can find him at outraguos.com. He sells a DVD with GPS coordinates for the Northwest, and he does a good job with Glass Buttes, right down to, this is his detailed map. He's got GPS coordinates for these. Here's mahogany, here's a gold sheen, here's a purple and silver. So if you're really interested in it and you're going to go out there, this is what you want next. So what I tell people is there's like 3 ways to use these guidebooks. If you really want to find amber, then in my Washington book, there's one amber locale up at Issaquah. If you want to explore a place, like I'm going somewhere for a family reunion or a business trip, what can I find? Or, I live here, what's in my backyard? Or the third is one of those giant 7-day looping trips where you go out and back. How do I maximize my big summer road trip? So I like to tell people that guidebooks are just how you get started with your plans. I'm a big fan of Google Earth. I think it's getting better and better. I like to upload my photos to Panoramio, but they discontinued that. There's a new one that I've got to convert over. Obviously, we've all heard of stories, death by GPS, where somebody followed it too closely, so you have to be careful. I have an overlay that I purchased for $30 a year called Mine Cache, and it shows me where all the mines were, and it's come in really helpful. Also, Google Maps. I like to be able to switch over to the terrain feature so that you can see where the creeks are. It's really good for the directions, and again, free, but the overlays don't work there. But the new part that I like about it is, and I think this is also on Google Earth, where you can drag the little person down from the top right and put them on that street, and then you get the view as the car went by with the camera. I think that's so cool. I have found so many gates that I know not to expect to be open that way. It's really helpful. Yeah, there's a gate. Yep, it's closed. This is one that I found a few years ago. This was a rockhound, Bob Bestie, and he published his location guide that he had collected from other rockhounding groups. But it's really, it's not verified in the field. He didn't go out and track them down. He heard about them, he read about them, he researched them, and there's no GPS coordinates. This is one that's kind of got the same problem called fossilsites.com, and it lists for every state, and then I don't know what the source material was. It doesn't say. It has not been verified in the field, and sometimes it will be as vague as a section, which is a square mile, right? And it's this one I find particularly is overtaken by events. There'll be a mall, there'll be a housing project, there'll be something, but at least it's a start, and you know what's out there. So I like to tell people there's in-the-box thinking and there's out-of-the-box thinking. In the box is, obvious geology stuff. University programs, state departments. I'll show you what I mean by that. There's an online map for Oregon geology. If you want to be the first person to discover a dinosaur in the state of Oregon, you have to go to that age of rocks, right? It has to be either the Triassic, the Jurassic, or the Cretaceous, and so that's in this belt right in here by Mitchell. Some rock groups are really good about posting their little trips as a blog, but when I went through and checked these out for my Washington book, 9 out of 10 of them were gated, closed, hadn't been updated, so the information was really old. If you're into collecting meteors or meteorites, there is a website devoted to reports of meteors, and then the professional hunters go rush the area and try to calculate and triangulate, do the math. But then there's also out-of-the-box thinking, because I have got good information from the river rafters, the fishermen, and their fishing access, if I'm just looking in the gravels, and even the archaeology, and I'll show you what I mean. Up on the Klickitat, I was trying to figure out where I could camp, where I could get access to the gravels below the Indian reservation, and the river drifters had a really good write-up of where to camp south of the reservation. Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, they actually have a website where you can, by county or by river, or if you know the site, you can find out where you can actually get access to the water. And if you're looking for agates and petrified wood, that's really helpful if you can get right down to the water and not worry about your car getting towed, that it's free. Some of them have bathrooms set up. So this was really helpful when I was doing the Washington books. And then this was an archaeology site that I stumbled on. It's the Obsidian Studies Library down in Corvallis. And lo and behold, they had a map of all the different locales where obsidian was mined, or they found it as a source. And what they did was they would pick it out, they would put it through the gas chromatograph and get its chemical signature. And then when they were finding arrowheads or spear points out in the desert, they knew where it came from. They found, when they did this for Yellowstone, they found that there was Yellowstone material all the way over to Illinois. So, really a cool job. Obviously, we're way ahead of Washington as far as obsidian. So when you're going out, I like to, there's 4 big things that can get you. There's the weather, there's road conditions, there's forest fires, and there's flooding. So go to weather.com, right? Just check it just before you go. See if it's going to be as hot as blazes out there. You can get the road conditions for almost every state. I just love being able to catch the road cam itself and see an area. When I was trying to go down to the Northern California, I could see that there was still snow right up to the shoulders of the road, and I needed to wait a month, which was a blessing. So I'll show you later. Fire danger. There are fires out there in the summertime. I mean, this was in July 2013. Oregon was in pretty good shape, but Idaho was burning up. So this, that's the 7 Devils, right? And it's not that the road is always necessarily going to be blocked, but it's going to get ugly, and if you can change your trip. And this is one of my favorites, the U.S. Department of Geological Survey, USGS. You can click on each one of these dots, and you can pull up what the state of the water is. The light brown means it's in the 10th percentile of all that ever measured recordings for that particular spot. If it's burning red, then it's total drought, light brown. But you can see most of the streams were pretty normal. But for rockhounding, I like droughts. Forgive me, but I like low water. I like to get to the bottom of the stream, also for gold panning. I like to get to the very bottom. So that's really helpful to know what's going on. My phone never seems to have service out in the hinterlands, so one thing I thought of to pull up. And then the Les Schwab. The Les Schwab tires, they'll fix them for free. So despite all that, recon is pretty hazardous out there. I'm going to show you some of the dumbest things I've done, because stuff happens. I don't take a sedan out there. This is a sign I saw in Northern California. No sedans, not recommended. I thought that was pretty cool. If you want some fun, tell your friends you're doing a presentation on all the stupidest stuff you ever did. They'll remind you. For instance, this was not rockhounding. Who knew? Trying to get to Hanson Creek. That road is not open. We woke up in Idaho one morning to this. It was cold. It was like 17 degrees. Other mistakes I've made with the weather, I forgot to check my AC. Went out to the Alvord Desert. And then we've done a lot of blue tarp camping in our area. If you take too many tents, you've overpacked. You don't have enough room. So tarps are great, but there's a little bit of a hillbilly look to getting it up. One time we're going out to the Boise River area, and first it burned, and then it rained, and the rain washed the denuded slopes so harshly. There were picnic tables out in here. They got bulldozed down. This was a beautiful, lush, green campsite 20 days before we got there. What are you going to do? There's fires. It's the West. Sometimes it's kind of fun, though, to watch them put them out. There is that. When it's really strict fire season, like first you can't, you have to be in a campsite, and then you just can't have a campfire at all. So one time we were outlaws. We lit a candle. That's a campfire. Flooding. I was up in Montana, and we got into a cloudburst, and it turned all that clay dust into gumbo, filled up the wheels, and then the wheel wells. It was just, we had to pick it out with a geology pick. Down at National, Nevada, I had a minivan down there. That was where we picked up that noise on the tie rod. It always made a click after that. Irrigation ditch that I was not counting on. And then driving 250 miles to Glacier, and the road was washed out. I had to spend $5 a gallon at Yellow Pine. And I had to pour it myself, too. I cleared out my paint job up at Enumclaw. I wiped out the side mirrors of a borrowed RV down at Hampy Camp looking for Jade. And then this is my record, an 11-point backup turn on an old logging road. This is another great one. That's my wife. We got 2 flats at the same time. As near as I can tell, I was going too fast. I hit a washboard area, and it knocked the tires, the bead, off of the rim, and I couldn't get enough air pressure. I had a pump. I couldn't get it to reseat the tire, and so we left the woods on a flatbed truck on that trip. Let's see, in 3 days, 4 rigs had 6 flat tires out at Sucker Creek. We drove to the Les Schwab. We came back, replaced one, and we got another flat as soon as we pulled out. The rock out there is like a jasperized ash, a tuff, and it's just really sharp and hard. We collected antique nails at Silver City. The boys came up, they had a handful of nails, and they were the old square ones. Oh. Got a question?
Sorry for interrupting, but Sucker Creek.
That's below Vail.
Below Salem.
Vail. Vail,
Vail.
Oregon, almost
Oh.
to the Idaho border.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a flat tire there too.
Okay. That
The
rock
same
is
last
hard. Yeah, say yeah, Vail. Yeah, free popcorn. Here's one. The kids like to take old pallets and have campfires up in the hills, and they burn all the wood and leaves all the nails. And so you don't know it, right? The one we found, there was a big snow park area. There was an outhouse, just a nice area. It was late. We could camp right there. But as you drove through, I realized we were driving through old campfires. And when I went back over there with a magnet, there were like 30 nails just jumped to it. That is the enemy. Those. And you know how Mom always told you had to wear your best underwear because if you got in a wreck and they at the emergency room? It kind of goes for unpacking at the tire store too. If it's all thrown in at a mess and you have to dive in to get your spare, so yeah, totes. We've met a lot of logs in the road. I went around one at Gold Hill. We literally chopped through one at Hell's Canyon at the Carson Placer, and we had to go back at Usk. And then we blundered into a road rally. We went to Dismal Swamp. It's the material that's, it's another Smoky Quartz locale in Idaho, and they were having a road rally. The car club rents the Forest Service roads for the weekend, and they pretty much just go out and bash their cars up. That's what it seemed like to me. They didn't do any rock hounding at all, but they just bash their cars up. So that was fun. Wildlife is pretty cool out there. We literally camped on the boundary of a turf war between yellow jackets and bald-faced hornets. And what happens is the yellow jackets are down here, death from above, the bald-faced hornet comes down, lands on their back, bites off their head, and flies off with the body.
Wow.
And none of us were getting stung until the kids got all agitated. I mean, the war was happening without our help, but yeah. We got chased out by deer flies at Medellin Falls. We got in there late at night, we got camp set up, we were having a good time, went to bed, and when we got up, the deer flies had found us, and they were the biting kind. And it was the fastest we ever packed. We probably packed up in 4.5 minutes and got out of there. Ugh, still gives me creeps. There's an area in Idaho at South Mountain, another pegmatite, and there was no camping except for where the cow pies were. Sorry, we had tents. And then we've waited for a lot of herds. These were cool. This was out on the Salmon River out in Idaho. Come on, babies, hurry up. But I got stuck in a cattle herd out by Fossil, Oregon. And the worst part about that is you're driving along before you get to it, and there'll be what looks like a very hard cow pie. And there's something about the surface tension. When you hit it, it just and your car smells like that all weekend. This is a Yellowstone. That's his job. We've met more than my share of rattlesnakes, scorpions, vultures, turkeys, a lot of turkeys. We learned how to talk turkey down in California. There was an old Tom with several hens, and we pulled up alongside him, and gobble, 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 gobble. And he came right back. Gobble, gobble, gobble. And he got the last word too. He was the story behind this guy is there's literally a state patrolman, a Washington State Highway Patrol guy is standing off to the side to make sure that nobody bothers this marine mammal while he's napping. It's a felony, it's a violation. But B, they can really turn their head fast and they can snap your arm off if you're thinking you're just going to pet him. But just You know, the next time your grandkids wake you up from a nap, think about that. Having a state patrolman guarding you as you sleep. And then about 6 months later, we were up at Yellowbanks up on the Olympic Peninsula, and we found a skeleton. And I always wondered if they were related. And that smelled. Speaking of which, dogs are exciting to bring. One time, I think it was Mambo, he scared off a bear. We literally could smell the bear. The wind was right, and it's a smell that you don't mistake after you smell it. But we heard the dog barking way up on the ridge. One time, Mambo fell into a vertical shaft near Midas, and I had to pull him out by the collar. And then the other time, he was part Australian collie, and we stopped to look at the maps. He jumped out, he made a beeline down. There were 6 cows, and they were not circled appropriately, and he just, and he'd never seen a cow before in his life, right? He was a city dog, but he knew what to do. It was pretty fun. So I like taking dogs. They're worth it. Although as a golden retriever, they really don't retrieve gold. They don't drive very well. Kids, I think, are fun to take. They're a challenge, but one trip we took a generator, a TV, and a Nintendo so they wouldn't get bored. They could set it up. But then they tried to wade across the Klamath River, and it was one of those where shallow, 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 deep, and they were right to the deep spot when we caught them and yelled at them. And one kid walked across the coals, hot coals, hot coals, hot coals. And then I took my dad and my uncle as long as I could, took the elders out there. My uncle was the one that suggested I get a geology degree. My dad was just always up for a road trip. He really didn't care. He was the worst rockhound. But, you know, you shouldn't rockhound alone, right? You should at least have someone along for safety. So it's all worth it. I enjoyed it out there. Gold Panning, California is out now. This is an interesting project that is coming out soon. It's called Geology Lab for Kids, where I show little labs how to grow your own crystals with halide, with sugar, how to pan, a little bit on fossils, a little bit on meteors from your gutter, and magnetic slime, which the kids know. And then coming up, I'm going to redo Northern California. I'm late on that. I've got a Colorado book that I'm doing this summer. I'm supposed to do a beginner's guide to rockhounding for fountain guides, and then these both need updates sometime in the future. So, my call to action for you, we need more people out there. Share your pictures in Google Earth, record your own coordinates, start a blog, join a club, help the newsletter people out. Give back a little. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Questions? You guys done much rockhounding?
A little bit.
Oregon Beach, down to the coast.
Have you done anything down in Southern California?
I mostly was doing gold panning down there. But we got down as far as Cambria and Moonstone Beach, Jade Cove. For some reason, if it's not LA,
Yeah.
it's Northern California. So those are in the Northern California book.
Yeah, just
Not sure how that works.
my recent trip down in Carlsbad. There's a tunneling mine right outside Lake San
Sure.
Diego.
Yeah, the Paula.
The Paula mine, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there last year in May.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
Well, the one I went to, it was tailings that they brought from the mine and they dumped in this campground. And you guys go through the tailings, and it was okay.
Does a black light help for that?
I
I wonder. I can't remember if I saw that one. But there's a lot of the coastline there along Big Sur has got some interesting stuff. And so.
I found a lot of really interesting stuff in the after polish, just laying on the sand ocean side.
Yeah.
Just underneath that pier, just there's just a ton of stuff just sitting there.
Well, it takes that eye, right?
Yeah.
After you've polished a few things, you start to kind of think about what it's going to look like when it comes out of the tumbler, and that really helps. Yeah.
Up in the Galena area on a river,
Uh-huh.
I've been told, local legend, don't know if it's true, that there's a sapphire deposit someplace up there.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any truth to that or not. But there's some neat looking rocks that I found this river.
Yeah. That's the middle fork of the John Day River.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a goodly amount of gold in there.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. After this winter, it ought to be really interesting.
Should be good. There is some interesting mineralization in some of those hard rock mines up there. So it's possible. Probably have to go way up, away from that road. But I don't know, sapphire. You know, one of my books, it talked about thought they found rubies along the coast in California, and it was just so obvious they were garnets coming out of the schist there. There's no rubies along the coast, so you have to be careful. Sometimes people will mistake quartz crystals and right.
Fool's gold for gold.
Fool's gold, yeah, fool's gold. Yeah, so it'd be interesting. Another story about sapphires from someone thought they were in the Boise Basin area out by Boise, but my friend Tim Fisher said that was someone started that rumor because they had collected sapphire in the sawtooths and they weren't supposed to be in that far, and so they just said, "Wow, we got them from over in the Boise Basin area." And then the next thing you know, it shows up in a rockhounding book because someone heard it and it seemed good.
Bluestone and the Yakima, that area. You know, it's kind of.
Oh yeah, the
feathery blue.
yeah, the Ellensburg blue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I put that in the Washington book. That's harder and harder to find open areas where you can hike around, but it's good stuff.
The Sunstone Patch is only the one out of Paisley, isn't there?
There might be a second one. I was driving out there one time and there was a sign that said Sunstones, and we weren't looking for sunstones that weekend. So we just let it go. And then I never found it again, but one of the web resources that I pulled up seemed to indicate there was a second one. It's in volcanic rock, and those ridges and hills are covered with basalt, so it's not impossible to imagine it out there. But the Rabbit Hills part that's in the Oregon book, that's pretty easy, and it's in the Wars's book too. It's been in every Oregon rockhounding book since forever because it's a free spot. As soon as you get out of the car, it's littering the ground.
The value is starting to go up in the market too, with that, which is kind
Yeah,
of fun.
I knew it was destined to crash when my neighbor came to me and said, "What if I ship all this to China to get it faceted and then bring it back to sell it?" I thought, well, that's just, yeah, great. The first one will be fine, but then when you flood the market with it, that's just business 101. Yeah, but the reddish Schiller sunstone, there'll always be a good market for that.
Well, thank you, Garrett. I'm just going to say thanks for watching, everybody, in the Facebook world. I learned so much. I didn't realize there's 250 different kinds of obsidian.
That's what Fisher told me. Yeah.
That's insane. I had no idea.
You can find it, they can name it.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, it was my
And I'm
pleasure.
going to say goodbye to everybody on Facebook. Thanks for watching.